Welcome to Valhalla Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Becky Hill, otherwise known as Soul Chaser Becky, and I am a proud Viking geek. I fell in love with the history, culture and mythology of the Viking Age, and I have been on an endless quest for more ever since. Join me as I discuss all things Norse with those who have been inspired by Viking Age history and Norse mythology in their creative works, or those who have studied the sagas and archaeology, and review how such subjects are being presented to modern audiences today. If you like Viking stuff, you are welcome in my Valhalla, and I hope you stay for the conversation. This episode of Valhalla Conversations is dedicated to comic artist Tim Odland, who sadly passed away this summer of 2025. Tim's lifelong dream was to illustrate a comic published by Image Comics. Beware the Eye of Odin is that comic, that dream. I will treasure it always in Tim's memory for an example of his amazing talent. Thank you for your dream, Tim. Rest in peace. Welcome everyone to Valhalla Conversations podcast. After a bit of a hiatus through September and October for a wonderful variety of reasons, we are back. Valhalla is open and our newest guest, I am delighted to announce, is Doug Wagner, and he is here to speak to me about his wonderful comic book, because I have the combined edition here, called Beware the Eye of Odin. Now, if that doesn't scream Viking to you, then you need glasses. So welcome, Doug. Welcome to Valhalla.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Becca. I've been looking forward to talking to you, so this is awesome.
Brilliant. Would I be safe to say that maybe this particular comic series is one of your lesser-known titles? Because I know you've kind of got a wonderful serial killer, fashionista comic arc going on that's only recently finished, I believe.
Yeah, that would be fair. Yeah, Beware the Eye of Odin is definitely probably one of my lesser-known titles. I've kind of become known, whether I wanted to or not, for doing serial killers and cannibalistic furries. So, that's kind of like what I'm known for. But, I do love to dive into other stuff. So this is one of my favorites.
Oh, well, I'm pleased. Well, I don't know how it came up on my algorithm on socials, and I was like, I need to have that. That looks amazing. So it's straight to my local comic book shop, and thankfully Kapow Comics were able to get it in for me, and I've reread it at least twice now, and I just absolutely love it. So I guess we should start at the beginning of where did the idea for this amazing original Norse story in a way come from?
Well, I mean, Tim Odland, the artist, and I, we started out. I moved here in Utah probably about 10 years ago. And he and I just started going to, I met him I'm getting confused. Let me start over. So we met at what we have down in Salt Lake, a drink and draw. So a lot of comic book artists and other artists from animation and stuff get together once a week and just kind of sit and talk business and doodle and that kind of stuff. And we found out we live 5 minutes from each other. So we started I was like, hey, why don't we just start riding together and save the gas money? Because it's a 30-minute trip for us. And we started driving together and quickly became friends. Tim was one of the sweetest human beings I'd ever met, and he was an artist and I loved his work. And then we decided we wanted to meet together just one-on-one. So strangely as it is, we started meeting every Wednesday for lunch at Taco Bell. And we probably met there for 3 or 4 months. And then one day he goes, hey, why don't we work on something together? And I go, dude, I'd love to work with you. I love you. I love your work. Let's do something. I was like, do you have anything in mind? He goes, all he said was, I want to do Trolls versus Vikings.
Oh,
yeah. And I was like, sold. It was an easy, oh, yeah, dude, let's do that. And our first plan was to do a 40-page one shot. You've obviously read the trade now. We kind of got away because we just loved the characters and what we were doing on the book. And he'd add pages and I'd add pages. And it just became this 200, kind of magnum opus and we were going to release it online at first, and that was a plan. But that's how it came to be. That was the basic premise, was I want to do Trolls versus Vikings.
It's sometimes the simplest ideas are the best ideas, and I love that. And there are definitely Trolls and there are definitely Vikings in this book, so you've still ticked that off wonderfully well. And I must say, kind of like Tim's art is absolutely gorgeous. I just love it. And if I could have that cover in a frame on a wall, I definitely would have. Not that I have many walls in this house that I can put my Viking stuff on, because I live with a family, so pretty much it's all family photos. Alas, I will have a Becky cave one day. Obviously, let's dive into the three protagonists, because there are three. There is Helgi, a Norse prince, who has some father issues, some issues with self-esteem, possibly a cursed axe. I'm trying not to give away too much. There is Stigger, who is a one-armed smith who's past his prime, as your own blurb says, and he's trying to re-find himself as a warrior, because people see him as a ex-warrior because he's only got one arm, as you would understand, because you can't really do much with one arm. But he finds a way, a very genius way. I absolutely love it. And my favourite character of all, because Valkyries are my catnip, is Caitlin, who, in the words of the blurb, is a female warrior convinced she is a Valkyrie. And I just love that hint of doubt, kind of like, is she the crazy lady in the village, or is she real? And I just absolutely love her absolute kind of like just childlike joy, and the fact that she has a little one-eyed mouse as a companion. I thought that was just a lovely twist. So how did you come about with these three characters then?
I mean, it all started with Helgi, obviously, since he's the main character, and we're kind of, okay, what can we do with something that's a little different with Vikings? We came up with Helgi, and then Tim was the one that was like, hey, I got this idea for a one-armed character. And I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but let's do it. It's like, Tim and I would just kind of throw out crazy ideas. And then I was the one that was like, hey, I'd like, to kind of have like a female character to kind of finish out the little team we made. And just kind of started going, hey, I want something a little different, a little off center. And Caitlin came to mind. I was like, oh, what if she thought she was a Valkyrie? Like, what would that look like? And how would the town treat her? So it was really important to us to have like Helgi, who's clearly, I mean, in regular society would be a prince. So, he'd be on the upper echelon, surrounded by kind of like two misfits. The town kind of have dismissed these people as maybe not, the normal worthiness you'd see in a society. And so it was very important to us to like throw that into Helgi, because, as you mentioned, like he thinks he's cursed. And so he's like, oh, of course I get these two, because like I'm a crazy person who thinks she's a Valkyrie and a guy who's a warrior, which makes no sense. Like that was really kind of like, just us throwing around ideas. And then Tim, like, he ran off with Caitlin immediately and came back with that cloak that she wears. It was just, magnificent. Again, don't want to spoil too much, like, where we want to go with that. But then like, I was like, man, we need a little animal in the mix. And that's where the one idea came in, that kind of like, she thinks whispers sweet things in her ear.
Well, I must admit, kind of like, it was only after the second reading that Helgi really stuck out to me as having definite connection with genuine Norse sagas. And I don't know if you have ever kind of like read the Poetic Edda or the Prose Edda and come across the saga of Helgi Hundingsbane.
Yep, definitely. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, what was fantastic about this whole thing is Tim is actually, like, he's first generation Norwegian American. So Tim is a Viking. So, it was kind of fun because he would start talking about stuff that necessarily here in America, when we learned Norse mythology, they didn't dive much into. So like, I knew a little bit about trolls, but not as much as, like Tim grew up as like, that's a major part of their mythology. And so, elves and all these kind of things that he had, and how they celebrated Christmas was different than how I celebrated Christmas growing up. And so I have to give a lot of that to Tim, because he would hand me books and go, hey, read this. And let's use this for inspiration. He goes, I want to do something that's based on Norse mythology, but not necessarily as retelling Norse mythology, like spin on it. Because that's kind of like trolls became the main villain, because obviously everybody's kind of done the frost giants, and we can go on the things that have been used. So we kind of wanted to touch on stuff like Earthian smiths and elves, but not necessarily make them the focal point.
That's a good point about the Earthian smiths as well, because I thought, oh, this is a really fresh take on dwarves. And I really, really like it. I absolutely love, because certainly kind of in the kind of like original tellings, they say with the Eddas mainly kind of describe how the races came to be. The dwarves are always described as being kind of like being earthy or underground, like from the underground layer of Midgard, not from the top like mortals and humans are. And I thought that's a really clever twist on it. Really clever twist. And it certainly explains why they're so good as smiths, because they know their metals and their ore.
Right. And then you went right down the same path that we did when we were thinking about it. Like, how is this a little different? It's like, well, they're kind of like mountain people. They live inside mountains. Like, what would they look like? You know, like humans need light. You know, we need outside. And so like that's where we kind of like wanted to do a little shift and go, oh, wait a minute, what if they're real mountain people? Like we take that literal, you know, and so that's kind of like we kind of dove down that rabbit hole.
But it's wonderfully done, and certainly it is a refreshing change from having Vikings versus giants, because of course giants are always the enemies, at least for the gods at least, so it kind of makes sense to then make them the enemies of the humans. Not that you ever read about that much in kind of like original or even contemporary sources. And certainly thinking about to how prominent trolls are, it's made me remember that when I went to Norway for the first time last summer, for my little humble academic debut, I did bring back a children's story about a little troll. And there were lots of trolls in there, including some with multiple heads and multiple eyes, or even one with 3 heads and sharing 1 eye, which was really weird. But it just shows the variety, and the variety of trolls you guys have come up with in this book. I mean, they're all incredibly grotesque. They're genuinely not nice characters, and I absolutely applaud the variety of grotesqueness you've invented.
I mean, I have to give all that credit to Tim, because Tim, you know, and I was thinking classic, you know, 4-arm, or, you know, 4-limb, 1-head trolls. And Tim came and he's like, man, I want to do something crazy. And he started showing me all these things that he'd been doing for years on trolls, because, you know, it's one of his favorites. Wow. And I was like, dude, we have to do those. Like, there's no doubt, you know. And then it was just like, how do we fit them in there, and how do we like interpret their society? You know, and how can we have fun with, like, you know, and as you see in the book, when we have 2 heads, you know, sometimes when we have a head with more than 1 troll, I mean, a troll with 1 head, you know, like as they're trying to talk, you know, those kind of things. It's fun with like, hey, let's play with this, make it a little grotesque, make it a little bit horrific, but at the same time, how can we still have?
It is. It's wonderful. I would like to touch a bit on perhaps the cursed axe that Helgi has. And I just love the name, Mischief's Whisper, because it's just such a gorgeous name. And the fact that they then tie it into how it's come from deep within the earth near Loki. And of course, nothing good ever comes from Loki. That's why Loki's always been tainted with mischief and mayhem and chaos. And I really love that, because of course there's lots of elements of cursed items in Norse mythology. Like I only recently this spring learned more about the curse or tear thing, and that whole saga of kind of like killing one generation off after another, because it's just that's what it's destined to do. And I really like that, and it really suits his character in trying to find his own identity and strength and confidence in that, because he thinks he's cursed because of all the sad, unfortunate circumstances that happened around him growing up, and hence that's why no one really wants him in the village. But then because he's good with the axe, that gives him that false kind of confident over-reliance on it in a way. And I really liked how you explored that narratively and, of course, within Tim's wonderful artwork.
Yeah, I mean, we had so much fun with that character and the axe too, because like you said, like Helgi is so desperate to be successful and be accepted that like finding something that makes him feel more powerful, he's immediately going to be drawn to it, which I think leads into like Loki in my head. Like he's not going to be the guy that like just comes out and says, hey, I'm going to help you, but I'm going to destroy you at the same time. You know, it's like he's one of those guys that's going to like whisper in your ear and make you feel more confident and get you to a point to where like you feel invincible and then take it away from you. And so that was like our whole thing with the axe was like, hey, how can we like use this against Helgi, and it's going to continue to make him feel more and more confident and get him closer to what he thinks he wants. But hopefully what, you know, we pulled off in the story, he learns like, oh, wait a minute, that's not really what I wanted all along.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and I really appreciated Stigger's kind of arc of all thing, kind of like his, and he said it so many times, of course, particularly to Helgi, kind of like, you don't decide my fate, I decide it. And that kind of like that self-determinism is so strong. It comes through in so many different sources to do with the Vikings, kind of, and it's hard to say whether it's one that we've enhanced or elaborated on, being kind of like so many centuries removed now, because that's our ideal of the Vikings, that they kind of like go to death with a sword in their hand or nothing at all kind of thing. But I really liked that, and of course, that was the other thing I was going to ask actually. What made you decide? I mean, I know you said Tim came through with the design for Caitlin, but was it always clear from the start that you were going to have her as a Valkyrie wannabe, or were you going to possibly make her go down the Shield Maiden type route?
Oh, from day one, we wanted her to be like, go down the Valkyrie path.
Cool.
Like, I'm a Valkyrie, I'm a proud warrior, like I've been to be the one on earth, kind of thing, and follow that path all along and make it so that, like, hopefully throughout the whole story, even the reader is not sure, because Helgi and Steiger definitely aren't sure that she's saying, it's like, well, you're a Valkyrie, like, okay, and that's touching on, for us, it was like touching on religion as a whole. It's like believing in unseen things, and like, what is your religion based on, and that faith. And Caitlin to us was like the ultimate person of faith. She's like, she knows that this is all true. And you can kind of tell, Helgi and Steiger are like, they do have their faith. It's not necessarily like, there's moments where you're like, hey, I'm not sure I believe all of this. Like, I'm not sure I believe in all of the stuff that I hear, because it's, as children, we hear these tales, you're like, well, I don't know if an invisible person can do that. So, that's what we kind of really wanted to lean into with her.
Well, that brings me to the kind of like to those first few lines on those first few pages about Helgi kind of like saying, kind of like, my father told me tales of this, that, and that happening, kind of like, okay, Stigger, I've got a dead giant in my throne room. Can you please tell me, are they all true? And I'm like, wow, that is such a brilliant hook to bring the reader in, and you do hit the story running. There's no great narrative build up or even background set up for either these characters, but we kind of like, they're so well defined, the reader doesn't really need to know any great detail. You get the odd bits from them all in conversation with each other, and that's enough to still help them feel fully embodied, so to speak, even though I personally would love to see kind of like how Caitlin first decided to declare herself as a Valkyrie wannabe, and what happened with Stigger and his father, and of course, ideally, how that giant came to be in the village and how Helgi killed him, of course.
Well, and that's fair, because I remember when we were talking about the initial that was supposed to be 40 pages. So with only 40 pages, we were thinking we had to dive in quick. And so we passed all the typical narrative that you normally get in a buildup, in the first act of a story. And so we kind of had to just go, hey, we're going to dive deep in first. And then somehow 40 pages turned into 200. So I was like, so you're fair in saying that, because that was initially we were just doing 40. Like, we were convinced we were only doing 40 and just got carried away.
Well, what you guys have achieved is sensational, and I definitely would, if there was a prologue or even a sequel to this, I would be all for it. It would get my money from the word go. Most Viking things do, to be fair. So interestingly enough, kind of the idea of Odin's eye being involved is something I've never actually come across before, because of course most people who have this basic understanding of Odin know that he gave up an eye for wisdom. Traditionally or canonically, it's just sat in the bottom of a well somewhere and doesn't do anything. But I love how somehow it's come out of that well and passed around hands like a cursed object, as it does. And of course, it tells Helgi that if you don't return me to my rightful owner, then I will curse you with the death of blisters and boils and decay and all sorts. It did make me think back to, of course, the ring from Lord of the Rings, and I think that's what one of the reviewers on the back of the book, comiccon.com, says. It's one part Lord of the Rings, another part Netflix's Norseman, which I think is a really apt description, because it has got some lovely humour to it, as well as kind of like the kind of deeper exploration of just being a human in this fantastical world, which is sensational. But interestingly, that you guys kind of then must have discussed and decided that it wasn't going to go back to Mimi as well as such, but go back to Mimi, who's alive and well, albeit king of the frost giants in this universe.
Yeah, I mean, for us, you know, when we started, we're going to get a visitor. I got Abraham, my cat's going to come join us.
Cats are always welcome.
Yeah, he's going to do what he wants.
He doesn't press the stop recording button.
But yeah, I mean, for us, like, what was cool is when we started thinking about like what's going to be the driving force behind this, and we wanted, you know, obviously got to come up with something to keep the characters moving forward. And, you know, we just kind of bumped around on the Eye of Odin. I was like, hey, imagine if that was real, and like, what would somebody like Odin do to it to make sure that, like, because to us, I mean, having Odin's eye would be like a weapon, like an unimaginably magical, unstoppable weapon. And so we came up with that kind of idea, and it's like, well, wait a minute, Odin wouldn't let anybody just have it. So like he gave it to somebody, and then he's going to curse it so that nobody else can ever have it and use it.
Interesting.
So that was our whole, you know, again, we're making our own Norse mythology at that point. But, you know, the president was like, hey, this would be kind of a fun, you know, translation of what we've seen before. And you know, we loved playing with that eye and having it like actually move around in the liquid and look at stuff. And yeah, so that's kind of, it was just the driving mechanism for our whole story.
It works really, really well. And it's something I've always really admired about the Norse mythology, and that because it's not treated as almost like a sacred set of stories such as like the Bible or in Hinduism or in Buddhism, there is that freedom to play, that freedom to manipulate, to readjust, to reset things. And I must say, kind of like since the 18th century with Wagner, of course, people have just taken it and just run. And the things people have come up with, it both respects and also reflects the time that it was done. And I absolutely love what you guys, I just love it. I absolutely love it. I was going to say, did you ever discuss plans for maybe doing a sequel from all the pages that you couldn't quite fit in, or was there ever an option for that?
Oh yeah, I mean, with Tim and I, obviously there was. I mean, I talked about this to him. Unfortunately, Tim passed away this year. So, you know, obviously I wouldn't touch it without him. You know, to me, it's, you know, and I know that might make some people sad. It kind of makes me sad too, but it wouldn't be right for me to continue to do something with this without him. You know, it's just, it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't feel right for me anyway. And so, yeah, we had talked about like, oh, what else could we do if we kept going? You know, and because there's just so much more. You know, we kind of left it on the cliffhanger of like, you know, with Helgi and Caitlin, and you kind of learn some new stuff. And it's like, yeah, we could definitely do some more. And so there was definitely plans of possibly doing another sequel, but unfortunately Tim just got sick and we had to put that on the side.
Yeah, it is. I was very, very sad to learn Tim had passed, because if I could have had him on as well, that would just, it would have made this twice as fun. It really would have. And it's a shame that I'll never get to tell him personally how much his art is amazing. But I hope, and I know kind of like from the way you talk about him, he enjoyed doing that. And if he enjoyed doing this, then that's all that really matters, really.
Oh yeah, Tim loved nothing more than drawing and loved nothing more than comics. He had a really fun picture that he showed me. He read his first he started reading comics at age 10, and he bumped into like Spawn and Youngblood, you know, the Image classic stuff. And he went out and bought a drawing desk that week and said, someday I'm going to draw comics and work for Image. You know, and we kind of didn't talk about like how this all came about as far as the Image side of things, but like Tim's ultimate dream was always to do a book for Image. And so that happened. And so luckily before Tim passed, he actually got a chance to make his dream come true. And so that'll always be a special place in my heart too, that like Tim just wanted to draw comics and nothing more than drawing for Image. And somehow we managed to make that happen. You know, so like it's I mean, you got time for me to tell you that story?
Yes, please do. Please do.
So Tim and I have been working on this book, you know, and we're doing it on our free time. So we've been working on this book probably for a year, maybe two. And he ended up moving to Minnesota. And so, you know, we talk online and stuff like this. And he goes, hey, I want to go to this tiny little convention in Minnesota. And then he calls me and he's like, hey, I went to this little convention and Eric Stevenson, the president of Image Comics, was there. And I showed him the page. And I was like, oh, okay. He goes, I hope that you don't mind me, you know, just showing it as part of my portfolio. And I was like, of course not. Well, then like the very next day I get an email from Eric, because I've been working with Image since 2004.
Mhm.
And he goes, "Hey, how come you haven't told me about this Viking book?" And I was like, I didn't know, like, there was no plan, like I hadn't even thought about it. And so Eric called me and he's like, "Hey, dude, I want this book." And so it was just like this random, like Tim showing up to this tiny little convention in Minnesota and showing his pages to Eric, and Eric calling me the next day going, "Hey, I need this book." And that's how Tim managed to somehow, through blind luck, get to do his first Image book.
Well, it sounds like fate, the norms, the good vibes of the universe were leading him step by step to the right people at the right time. First meeting you, finding that connection, and then of course finding Eric at that Comic-Con. Oh wow, I'm so pleased he did get to achieve this. As untimely as his parting was. Because kind of like having achieved my dream only last year of talking about Valkyries in Norway, of all places, that I never thought I'd ever get set foot on. It's immensely fulfilling once you have that moment, no matter how big or small or how niche it is. And yeah, I have to agree, as sad as it is that there won't be more of this universe, I totally respect that it will then always forever be Tim's.
Yep.
Yeah, it's stunning. And the Huldrafolk, they're always staring at me from the cover because there's so many of them. The Huldrafolk are like little imps, and they're vicious looking little imps, and I love the strange language that they're all muttering as they're all taking bits and pieces when they find these three protagonists deep in the murky woods trying to get through. Especially of course when Caitlin says kind of like, "Oh yeah, kind of like don't trust them, they're vicious, they're mean," and they only just see one, and then the whole mass of them appears on the page. I thought that is a masterstroke of comic and artistry genius. It was wonderful, that one.
Oh, thanks. I mean, that with those guys, like I struggled a little bit because I kind of had them in my head from the very beginning when we started doing the story. And there's no, classical Huldrafolk in Norse mythology. So like we were struggling with that a little bit, but Tim was like, we can make up our own stuff from time to time. Let's do it. Like you said, like he draws one on one page, and then I can't imagine how many he drew on the next page. There's like 50 plus. And he put the page, and I'm like, dude, like you don't have to draw this many. He's like, "Oh no, like this book has to be perfect." And so like the fact that he spent days drawing that page, each little Huldrafolk that you see in there, just amazing that he went to that extent. But we had so much fun with those little characters, and the fact that they were just like a force of nature, right? They'd come through, they take shiny stuff, and they leave. And as long as you mess with that, you're fine. But the second, but they also, if they bite you, like they have the venom of a world serpent, so like, just stay still, let them take your shiny stuff, and they'll leave you alone. And so we had so much fun with those. That was one of my favorite parts of the book.
So how long overall did it take you both? You said we work on it for like 1.5 to 2 years. So is that the core that has come out now, or is that on the whole mass that you then had to shrink down a bit?
Oh no, I mean for us, we spent probably about 4 years doing the book.
Oh.
And so, obviously it's easier for me because I'm the writer. So I could write a couple of pages, give it to Tim, and then he'd run off and, we're both working full time at other jobs and doing this on the side. And, so, I mean, I was fine with it. I told Tim that right up front. I was like, "Hey, dude, there's no rush. Neither one of us are getting paid to do this. When we get done, we get done." And so, yeah, it took about 4 years, and I was fine with that. Like I said, I was completely happy to give Tim the time he needed to do, as you've seen the pages, these incredible pages, and sometimes where you have 50 plus Huldrafolk on a single panel, and you're like, this is unbelievable. Like, so I was more than happy to give him all the time he needed.
Oh, well, it really shows it. I mean, the length of detail, just kind of like, it's just astonishing. It absolutely and wonderfully is. Were there any other protagonists that you considered when you were developing this narrative, or did you always have in mind it would be kind of like an older guy, a young guy, and then at least a woman of some description type or other?
No, I mean, pretty much it had always been, I mean, we never went past 3. I think it kind of just fit, when we got, like, we initially came up with Helgi, and then he hit me with Steiger, and then we came up with Caitlin, and I was like, I think this is the perfect trio to kind of carry out the story. We don't need more. And, I mean, obviously we could have put a bigger band together, but again, at the same time, as I said before, thinking 40 pages, so we wouldn't have to really dive into all the characters. And so luckily 3 was exactly what we needed. And I think it ended up being perfect.
So since kind of like working on this, did you develop more of a taste or a curiosity for Norse mythology and Viking stuff, or was it pretty much just during this window of working on this book?
No, I've still read stuff from time to time on it, but reading through then was just amazing for me because I did not realize the impact and the reach that Norse mythology had across the world. You start diving into this stuff and you go, we've mentioned it before, like you're like, oh, wait a minute, Lord of the Rings is Norse mythology. And so, people think of it as, almost like a European thing, but then when you start digging deeper into like Norse mythology and stuff, and you hit that, and you see the influences in Greek and Roman mythology, and we start talking about the days of the week, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, most of the days of the week are named after Norse gods, and you're like, you don't understand the huge impact I think that Vikings and Norse culture had on the entire world until you start diving into it and going, oh, wait a minute. There's even some, tales from Norse mythology that leaked their way into the Bible. And you're just like, oh, wow, like I did not realize the reach this tiny section of the world had the entire world and still does. And so you love reading about, honestly, all the mythologies I love them because they're all, some of them are so strange, especially ones and African ones. And you're like, oh, I'd never heard of any of this. And this is crazy. Kind of, I think being European, more European influence, with Europe and in the US, we get a little bit of the Greek mythology. So we're like, oh, an 8-legged horse, who cares? We've seen. You're like, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. So I love it. I love it all. And it's so fascinating. And it's fun to read. I know why they made Thor the main character, but it's funny to read Norse mythology, the Thor, and then we get, like the Marvel Universe one where he's not a complete bumbling man of nothing but hormones and idiocy. Like I love the fact that the son of Odin is basically a complete moron. And in Norse mythology, and you love him for it because he's so dumb, you root for him. And I think that's what's fantastic about that character in the Norse mythology. But like I said, I love it all. I love diving into it. And it's so fun and wonderful and weird, based on, what I've been experienced to previously. And like I said, talking with Tim, like their little Christmas elf that lives in the barn and brings them gifts, Santa Claus, and those kind of things, and how his dad, and Tim did this until he passed as well. Like they dressed up as the elf on Christmas Eve, and they come in and, that's how they celebrated Christmas. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm very classic, like American trained, like, hey, Santa Claus tonight, blah, blah, blah. And to see them do that was amazing.
Oh, well, that's really nice to hear because it's always interesting because it's a question I got asked myself at my kind of like little academic debut last year, kind of like, as much as I've loved reading all things Norse, especially in fantasy fiction, but I'm definitely diving more and more into comics wherever I can find them. Like there's another comic coming out in October. No, we're already in October. November called Viking Moon, and it's basically Vikings versus werewolves in the newly discovered Americas, which again is a crazy idea, but somehow it works narratively because, hey, why not? It's like kind of like, has anyone ever found themselves going back to try and find out more about the original sources that inspired these modern interpretations, whether they're interpretations or retellings or complete fictional fabrications with Norse elements? And it's nice to hear that you've found equal fun and enjoyment in them as much as I have.
Well, I mean, Tim and his mom would bring me books that we can't get in America that were Norse mythology. And so it was like a totally different take, right? Because it's for those people in that area versus the Americanized version that we'll accept that here because this is the only text we're going to use for Viking mythology. And they had tons of books, and so that helped me so much to kind of get the feel for everything in the book itself. Because I was like, oh, wait a minute, we need to put this in there, because like it was just like I said, it's an amazing. I'm getting lost in thought, just because. My head's just stewing in all the wonderful things that I learned and how amazing it was and how magical it was. And I was like, I wish I'd have learned this stuff when I was a kid.
I mean, it is an interesting point because, of course, in America you have Leif Erikson Day, I assume. Kind of course, he discovered the Americas before Columbus did. Of course, in the UK, we're kind of riddled with Viking references historically because they invaded us so many times and changed our culture so much. But then we've got so many layers of other invasions and other peoples. It's all kind of a mix. But I don't have many friends that are properly, fully kind of like Norwegian or Danish or even Swedish. So I've never really encountered anyone to see how the actual like home nation of the Vikings see the Viking history. Because we learned about English history, you learned about American history, and I don't know if they learn that much more about their own complicated history in the Viking Age or just focus on how the nations evolved into the nations they are today. Because of course they were as splintered as England was back in the Viking Age. There wasn't an England in the Viking Age at all for a long time.
No, I mean, you're right. Like it's great to dive into that kind of stuff, and like Michelle Madsen, the colorist of the book, she's also first generation Norwegian.
Really?
Yeah, so we'd get on conference calls and they would talk, which I just referred to as Viking. So I didn't understand a single word of it. They talked back and forth for a couple of minutes in Norse. And it was just amazing, like, and then they'd start telling you tales of stuff like, I think where they passed it down more, like through families, like they passed their history down, I think more so than say we do, or we learn it in school. They would, this is the things they learned, and they just kind of took it for granted, as far as like, oh, we thought everybody knew this. And I was like, nobody knows this. It's like, I've never heard of any of this stuff. This is fantastic. Because, I'm one of those people that just loves to learn new stuff. And so getting to tell me tales of stuff of like, oh, well, my parents did this and this is how they were raised. And you're like, that's insane. Like it's just, so it was really cool. Like I said, it was fun hanging out with both of them doing this book.
Oh, that's really nice that there's such that strong heritage influence and connection coming all the way through. And I do implore anyone who's listening or watching to find Beware the Eye of Odin, whether it's a single issue or the combined paperback form. Go to your local comic book shop, check out your library, see if it's on Amazon, download it, borrow it, read it. It is absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely love it. And there's so much more I could talk about, but I'm trying not to spoil it for everyone. Excuse me. Pardon my cough, people. That's another reason why things have been difficult for the past week or two. But yes, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you about this. Are there any other projects that you might be working on that you might like to share with viewers and listeners today?
As I'm sure you know, like my publishers don't like me to talk about anything until they announce it. So
fair enough.
I'll be a good person and keep my jobs. So I can't really talk. Obviously, I've got if anybody's into cyberpunk, but I've got a Cyberpunk 2077 miniseries coming out through Dark Horse in January.
Oh, very good.
Talk about that. Yeah. The rest of the guys and I, we just keep working on books, and there'll be more books out next year. So,
Oh, wonderful! I'm so glad that you got constant projects coming through, and hopefully you're enjoying all of them as much as you enjoyed this one.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining me in Valhalla today, Doug. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm sure I will be emailing you again with any more questions and just fangirling observations about this wonderful book.
Becky, the pleasure has been all mine. Thank you for reaching out and doing this, and always feel free to reach out with more questions.
Thank you. I will do. Quite often, as I say to most people in my normal life who meet me, very often you do escape. You don't often escape once you've met me. Once I've got your email address or your WhatsApp number on, I'm on you. Especially if it's about Vikings or Valkyries. Yes, I'm definitely interested. And of course, thank you to your cat for her wonderful showcase.
Every podcast he shows up for. So he's my biggest podcast fan.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This episode of Valhalla Conversations is dedicated to comic artist Tim Odland, who sadly passed away this summer of 2025. Tim's lifelong dream was to illustrate a comic published by Image Comics. Beware the Eye of Odin is that comic, that dream. I will treasure it always in Tim's memory for an example of his amazing talent. Thank you for your dream, Tim. Rest in peace. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed the discussions between my special guests and myself. Please do check out the episode blurb for links to their works and websites. If you liked this episode, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. Let me know if you learned something new in the comments. And of course, click subscribe to Valhalla Conversations wherever you are listening or watching. This podcast can be watched on YouTube and YouTube Music, and it can also be listened to on Spotify, Amazon Music, Podcast Index, and on rss.com. We hope you can join us in Valhalla again soon for more conversations.